Have you ever contemplated the immense sorrow that pierced Mary's heart as she watched her beloved son suffer? September is the month dedicated to Our Lady of Sorrows, and what better way to honor her than by turning our gaze to her heart, pierced by 7 swords of sorrow. This September, our first video is a tribute to this mother who suffered so much for us, who remained steadfast in her faith when all seemed lost, and who teaches us to walk with hope even in the darkest moments. In this journey through Mary's sorrows, we will discover not only her suffering, but also her unwavering strength and infinite love, which make her a safe haven for all her children. Chapter 1. The Pierced Heart. Simeon's prophecy foretells Mary's first sorrow. Mary's first sorrow comes at a time that should have been filled only with joy. 40 days after the birth of the infant Jesus, Joseph and Mary took the little one to the temple in Jerusalem to present him to the Lord, as prescribed by the Mosaic law. With humility and obedience, the Holy Family fulfilled the rite of purification, offering a pair of turtle doves, the gift of the poor. What seemed to be a simple ceremony became a moment of divine revelation, forever marking Mary's heart. In the temple, an elderly man named Simeon, a righteous and devout man who awaited the consolation of Israel, recognized in that little child the promised Savior. The Holy Spirit, which was upon him, had revealed that he would not die before seeing the Messiah of the Lord. Moved by the Spirit, Simeon took the child in his arms and blessed God, uttering those words we now know as Simeon's canticle: Lord, now lettest thou thy servant depart in peace, according to thy word. For mine eyes have seen thy salvation. But after blessing Joseph and Mary, Simeon addressed the mother with words that would be like a sword piercing her soul. Behold, this child is set for the fall and rising of many in Israel, and for a sign which shall be spoken against. Yes, and a sword shall pierce through thy own soul also. As Saint Bernard reminds us, O Blessed Mother, a sword has truly pierced your soul. It could only penetrate the flesh of your son by first passing through your soul. At that moment, while holding her little son in her arms, Mary felt the first pain, the first wound in her immaculate heart. She didn't fully understand the meaning of those words, but she kept them in her heart, meditating on them in silence. The joy of divine motherhood was from the beginning united to the mystery of suffering. As Saint Alphonsus Liguori teaches, Mary from that moment always carried with her the wound of that prophecy, continually keeping before her eyes the death of her son and all the sufferings that would accompany it. This first sorrow teaches us that the Christian life, following Mary's example, involves embracing both joy and suffering, always trusting in God's designs. Chapter 2. Flight by Night. The Escape to Egypt marks the Virgin's second sorrow. The peace and joy of Bethlehem were soon interrupted by fear and urgency. After the visit of the Magi, who had come from the east following a star to worship the King of the Jews, the wicked King Herod, consumed by jealousy and fear of losing his throne, devised a cruel plan to kill all the children under 2 years old in Bethlehem and its surroundings, hoping to eliminate the newborn King of the Jews. In the dead of night, Joseph was awakened by an angel of the Lord who warned him, "Arise and take the young child and his mother, and flee into Egypt, and be thou there until I bring thee word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him." Without losing a moment, Joseph awoke Mary. With a racing heart and trembling hands, Mary took little Jesus, who slept peacefully, unaware of the danger that threatened him. In the darkness of the night, the Holy Family set out on their journey into the unknown. As St. John Chrysostom reflects, contemplate the admirable order of events. First the star, then the Magi, then the angel, and finally Joseph, God showing his providence at all times. The journey to Egypt, a foreign and pagan land, was not easy for this family from Nazareth. The roads were dangerous, infested with bandits and wild beasts. The desert, with its scorching heat during the day and penetrating cold at night, added difficulty to every step. Mary, holding her son close to her chest, felt her heart breaking as she thought of those innocents who would die in place of her Jesus. The words of Jeremiah resonated in her soul. In Ramah was there a voice heard, lamentation and weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and would not be comforted because they are not. Her second sorrow was twofold. On one hand, the suffering of exile, the uncertainty and hardships of the journey. On the other, the knowledge of the slaughter of the innocents, those little martyrs who, unknowingly, gave their lives for Christ. Saint Teresa of Avila invites us to contemplate this mystery. Think what this lady felt when she saw her son in so many persecutions, and what she went through on such a long journey. This second sorrow teaches us to trust in divine providence even when evil seems to triumph, and to remain faithful to our Christian vocation even amidst persecution and exile. Chapter 3. 3 Days of Anguish. The loss of the infant Jesus in the temple tears, Mary's soul apart. Years passed, and the infant Jesus grew in wisdom and stature, and in favor with God and man. When Jesus was 12 years old, Joseph and Mary, faithful to Jewish tradition, took him with them to Jerusalem for the Passover feast. It was the first time the young Jesus participated in this important annual pilgrimage, a significant moment in the life of every Jewish male who thus began to assume his religious responsibilities. At the end of the feast, as the caravan of pilgrims began their return to Nazareth, Jesus remained in Jerusalem without his parents' knowledge. Joseph and Mary, believing that the child would be among the numerous relatives and acquaintances traveling together, walked for a whole day. As night fell, when families gathered to rest, they began to search for him among relatives and acquaintances. Anguish overwhelmed them when they realized that Jesus was not there. St. Bernard describes Mary's state. Who can express the anxiety that then oppressed the heart of the most loving mother? Who could fail to be moved by the sight of this tender mother, asking everyone she met, "Have you seen the one my soul loves?" Immediately Joseph and Mary returned to Jerusalem, traversing the streets, asking everyone who might have seen him. Each hour without news was like a new sword piercing Mary's soul. For 3 days, the Virgin's heart knew the deepest desolation. As St. Alphonsus Liguori reminds us, in the loss of Jesus, Mary wept continually, making her own the words of David, "My tears have been my bread day and night, while they say to me every day, 'Where is your God?'" This pain was different from the previous ones. It didn't come from an external threat, but from the very absence of the one who was the center of her life. Finally, on the 3rd day, they found him in the temple, sitting among the doctors, listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were astonished at his understanding and his answers. Seeing him, Mary exclaimed, "Son, why have you done this to us? Look, your father and I, anxious, have been searching for you." Jesus' answer was mysterious. "Why were you searching for me? Did you not know that I must be about my Father's business?" They did not understand what he was saying, but Mary treasured all these things in her heart. This 3rd sorrow teaches us to always seek Jesus when he seems absent from our lives, and to trust that even in moments of apparent abandonment, he is fulfilling the Father's will. Chapter 4. The Encounter on the Via Dolorosa. Mary sees her son carrying the cross towards Calvary. Nearly 20 years have passed since that episode in the temple. Jesus, now a man, has begun his public ministry, preaching the kingdom of God, healing the sick, and drawing multitudes. Mary has followed closely, sometimes from afar, the path of her son, treasuring in her heart every word, every gesture, every sign of the fulfillment of the Father's will. But now in Jerusalem, during the Passover feast, events unfold with terrible speed. Jesus has been arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane after the Last Supper with his disciples. He has been subjected to an unjust trial before the Sanhedrin, before Pilate, and before Herod, scourged, crowned with thorns, mocked. He has finally been condemned to death by crucifixion, the cruelest and most humiliating punishment reserved for criminals. Saint Bonaventure invites us to contemplate Mary at this moment. When the Virgin Mother heard that her son had been condemned to death, her heart trembled, her strength left her, and she could barely stand. Despite her pain, Mary does not collapse. With superhuman strength, she forces her way through the crowd to be near her son in his final moments. And then, on the Via Dolorosa, the encounter takes place. Jesus, disfigured by the blows, exhausted by the loss of blood, moves with difficulty under the weight of the cross. Mary sees him, and their gazes meet in a moment that contains the entire history of salvation. There are no words, only a communion of pain and love that transcends time and space. As St. John Paul II wrote, "No one has experienced the mystery of the cross as the mother of the crucified, the overwhelming encounter of transcendent divine justice with love." Pious tradition, reflected in the Stations of the Cross, shows Jesus falling 3 times under the weight of the cross, and his mother contemplating each of these falls. St. Cyril of Alexandria tells us, "Who would not weep seeing the Son of God fall under the weight of the cross, and his blessed mother sharing his pain?" Mary's pain in this 4th encounter is indescribable. Seeing her son, the one she had cradled in her arms, the one she had taught to take his first steps, now staggering towards his death. This 4th sorrow teaches us to accompany Jesus in his passion, not to flee from suffering, to remain steadfast like Mary, who, despite her immense pain, did not abandon her son, but followed him to Calvary, giving us an example of unwavering fidelity. Chapter 5. At the foot of the cross, Mary remains with Jesus during his crucifixion. Arriving at Golgotha, Mary watches with horror as the soldiers stretch her son upon the wood of the cross, how they nail his hands and feet, how they raise the cross and let it fall into the prepared hole, violently shaking Jesus' body. The evangelist John, the only one present at this moment, tells us with sober eloquence, "Near the cross of Jesus stood his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. Stabat mater dolorosa, juxta crucem lacrimosa, dum pendebat filius." Thus begins the famous medieval hymn that evokes the sorrowful mother standing by the cross while her son hung upon it. What human words could express what Mary felt during those 3 hours of agony? As St. Bernard says, "The sword not only pierced the soul of Jesus, but also yours, O Mary. After your Jesus gave up his spirit, the lance that opened his side pierced his soul, but also yours. His soul was no longer there, but yours could not be torn away." From the cross, Jesus utters 7 words, and the 3rd is addressed to his mother. "Woman, behold your son," and then to the beloved disciple, "Behold your mother." In the most painful moment, Jesus expands Mary's heart, making her the mother of all believers. As St. Augustine explains, Mary is certainly the mother of the members of Christ, who are we, because she cooperated with her love in bringing forth into the church the faithful, who are the members of that head. Mary remained standing by the cross, not prostrate with grief, but erect in an attitude that expresses her active participation in the redemptive sacrifice of her Son. St. Ambrose comments, "We read of the mother her standing posture. We do not read of her weeping." It is not that Mary did not suffer intensely, but her pain was transfigured by faith and hope. Like a new Eve beside the new Adam, Mary cooperated with her Son in the work of redemption. This 5th sorrow teaches us to remain steadfast in faith, even in the darkest and most suffering moments. Mary at the foot of the cross is the perfect model for all Christians who face trials and tribulations, showing us that love is stronger than death and that fidelity to God can sustain the soul, even in the deepest sorrow. Chapter 6. In her arms, the taking down of Jesus' lifeless body and its entrustment to Mary. The earth had grown dark when Jesus, with a loud cry, gave up his spirit. The veil of the temple was torn in two, from top to bottom, and the earth shook. The centurion standing before him, witnessing the expiration of his breath, declared, "Truly, this man was the Son of God." The multitude slowly dispersed, striking their breasts in grief. Only a few faithful remained. John, the beloved disciple, the holy women who had followed Jesus from Galilee, and Mary, his mother, consumed by unspeakable sorrow. It was Friday, the day of preparation, and the Jewish authorities did not want the bodies to remain on the cross during the Sabbath, especially since this Sabbath was a high holy day. They petitioned Pilate to have the legs of the crucified men broken to hasten their deaths. The soldiers broke the legs of the two men crucified with Jesus, but upon reaching him, seeing that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. Instead, one soldier pierced his side with a lance, and instantly blood and water flowed out. Meanwhile, Joseph of Arimathea, a respected member of the Sanhedrin and a secret disciple of Jesus, found the courage to approach Pilate and request Jesus' body. Pilate, surprised that Jesus had already died, summoned the centurion for confirmation. Once confirmed, he granted the body to Joseph. Joseph, along with Nicodemo, who had brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes weighing about 100 pounds, proceeded to take Jesus down from the cross. St. Anselm tenderly describes this moment. Oh, with what reverence those holy men lowered the sacred body from the cross. And you, sorrowful mother, you stretched out your arms to receive your son, and clasped him to your breast, just as you had done in Bethlehem. The lifeless body of Jesus, disfigured by scourging, thorns and nails, now rested in his mother's lap, a scene Christian art has immortalized in the moving Pietas. St. Bonaventure invites us to contemplate Mary in this sixth sorrow. See how the afflicted mother embraces her son's body, how she bathes it with her tears, how she kisses those wounds from which our salvation flowed. Mary gently cleanses the blood from his face, closes his eyes, caresses his blood-soaked hair. Each wound on his body is a fresh wound in the mother's heart. This sixth sorrow teaches us the value of compassion, which means to suffer with another. Mary, receiving her son's lifeless body into her arms, shows us that true love does not recoil from pain, but embraces it and transforms it. As disciples of Christ, we are called not to turn away from the suffering of our brothers and sisters, but to accompany them with the same tenderness with which Mary held her son. Chapter 7. Solitude and Hope. Mary accompanies her son's body to the tomb. The sun began to set over Jerusalem, heralding the arrival of the Sabbath. Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemo, assisted by John and the holy women, had to hurry to bury Jesus' body before the onset of the Sabbath rest. With infinite care, they took the body from Mary's arms, anointed it with spices, wrapped it in a clean linen cloth, and placed it in a new tomb that Joseph had had hewn in the rock near the place of crucifixion. St. Gregory of Nyssa invites us to contemplate Mary's feelings at this moment. As they wrapped her son's body, the Virgin Mother accompanied each gesture with her tears and kisses, mingling her sorrow with the perfumes. Pious tradition shows Mary holding her son's body one last time before it was placed in the tomb, in a final heart-breaking embrace. When the heavy stone rolled into place, sealing the entrance of the tomb, it was as if a new sword pierced Mary's heart. Her son, whom she had carried in her womb, whom she had nursed, whom she had watched grow, and whom she had accompanied to the cross, was now separated from her by a cold stone. As Saint Ephraim says, When she saw them seal the tomb, her heart was also sealed with the seal of sorrow. Mary returned to Jerusalem accompanied by John, to whom Jesus had entrusted her from the cross. The evangelist does not tell us where the Virgin spent that Sabbath, the saddest and most solitary day of her life. Tradition places Mary in the upper room, where just days before Jesus had instituted the Eucharist and where the fearful disciples had taken refuge. In the solitude of that Sabbath, Mary lived what the Church would later call Holy Saturday, a day of silence, absence, and waiting. But amidst her grief, Mary preserved hope. She remembered the words her son had spoken on several occasions, proclaiming that he would rise again on the third day. As St. John Paul II reminds us, Mary is the believer who, in the hour of darkness, remains bravely faithful to her commitment, with the certainty that God's promises will be fulfilled. This seventh sorrow teaches us to live with hope even in the darkest moments of our lives. Mary's faith on Holy Saturday is the model for our faith when we walk through the valley of shadows, when God seems silent, when death seems to have the last word. Mary teaches us that after Good Friday and the silence of Holy Saturday, the joy of Easter morning always arrives. Chapter 8. The Mother of All Who Mourn. How Mary understands our sufferings. When we experience pain, we often seek solace in someone who can truly understand our suffering, someone who has walked similar paths of affliction, and who has known sorrow more profoundly than Mary, the mother of Jesus. As St. Bernard says, the measure of Mary's sorrow was proportional to the measure of her love, and since her love was so immense, her sorrow was also immeasurable. The Virgin Mary did not know suffering in a theoretical or distant way, but experienced it in the very depths of her being. From Simeon's prophecy to the taking down from the cross, every stage of her life was marked by swords of sorrow that pierced her soul. Therefore, when we approach her with our own sorrows, we find not only understanding, but a true compassion that springs from her personal experience. Saint Teresa of Calcutta, a great devotee of Our Lady of Sorrows, used to say, "No one can understand better than Mary what it means to embrace the suffering of others. She learned at the foot of the cross that true love implies sacrifice." Indeed, Mary not only suffered but transformed her pain into an act of love, uniting it to the redemptive sacrifice of her Son. In this way, she teaches us that suffering, when offered with love, acquires redemptive value. The saints have always found in Mary a safe haven in their tribulations. St. Maximilian Kolbe, before offering his life in Auschwitz, continually prayed to Our Lady of Sorrows. St. Pio of Pietrelcina, who bore the stigmata of Christ on his body, found solace in contemplating Mary's sorrows. He understood her pain, a pain mirrored in his own wounds. St. Faustina Kowalska wrote in her diary, "In the most difficult moments, I contemplate Our Lady of Sorrows, and learn from her to say, 'Let it be done unto me according to your word,' even when that word implies a cross." This is a profound truth, a testament to unwavering faith in the face of unimaginable suffering. The devotion to Our Lady of Sorrows is not merely passive contemplation of suffering. It's a journey of identification with Christ through Mary. As Pope Francis teaches us, Mary at the foot of the cross teaches us to be near those who suffer, not with empty words, but with that silent and effective presence that characterizes true love. In this way, the sorrowful mother becomes a teacher of charity, showing us how to accompany our brothers and sisters in their trials. She is a beacon of hope, a powerful example of resilience and steadfast faith. Chapter 9. The Devotion to the Seven Sorrows. History and significance of this Marian devotion. The devotion to the seven sorrows of Mary has deep roots in Catholic spirituality, tracing back to the Middle Ages. In the 13th century, a group of Florentine nobles, moved by the contemplation of Mary's sufferings, founded the Servite order, specifically dedicated to honoring the Virgin under this title. Philip Benizzi, the fifth superior general of the order, significantly contributed to the spread of this devotion. In 1233, according to tradition, the Virgin appeared to 7 Florentine nobles, asking them to promote meditation on her sorrows. These 7 men abandoned their riches and comforts to retreat to Montesenario, where they founded the Servite order. As Saint Alphonsus Liguori writes, "It was no coincidence that there were 7 founders, as there are 7 principal sorrows of Mary, so that we might understand that this order was born principally to honor the memory of the Virgin's sorrows." The devotion to the 7 sorrows quickly spread throughout Europe. In the 15th century, the councils of Cologne and Mainz approved the feast of Our Lady of Sorrows, initially setting it for the Friday after Passion Sunday. Later, Pope Pius VII, in 1814, extended this feast to the entire Church, establishing it on September 15th, a day after the exaltation of the Holy Cross, to underscore the intimate connection between the Passion of Christ and the sorrows of his mother. The symbolism of the 7 sorrows is related to the 7 swords that, according to the vision of Saint Bridget of Sweden, pierced Mary's heart. As Saint Thomas of Villanueva explains, just as there are 7 principal joys of Mary which the Church commemorates, so too are there 7 special sorrows that pierced her soul. These 7 sorrows, as we have seen, are Simeon's prophecy, the flight into Egypt, the loss of the infant Jesus in the temple, the meeting with Jesus on the way to Calvary, the crucifixion, the taking down from the cross, and the burial of Jesus. The recitation of the 7 Sorrows Rosary is a devotional practice that involves meditating on each of these sorrows, praying 1 Our Father and 7 Hail Marys for each. The Blessed Virgin, in her apparitions to Saint Bridget, promised 7 special graces to those who honored her tears and sorrows daily. I will grant peace to their families. They will be enlightened in the divine mysteries. I will console them in their sorrows. I will grant them what they ask of me, provided it does not oppose the will of my Son. I will defend them in their spiritual battles. I will visibly assist them at the moment of their death, and I will not go to heaven without taking my devotees with me. Traditional iconography of Our Lady of Sorrows depicts her with her heart pierced by 7 swords, or as the Pietà holding the lifeless body of her son in her lap. In many regions, especially in Spain and Latin America, the image of Our Lady of Sorrows is a central part of Holy Week processions. Dressed in mourning, with tears on her face and a dagger plunged into her chest, the image moves the faithful and invites them to contemplate the mystery of redemptive suffering. As Pope Benedict XVI reminds us, the devotion to the sorrows of Mary is not mere sentimentalism, but a truly religious attitude that acknowledges the salvific mystery of the cross lived alongside the Mother of the Redeemer. This devotion, far from being obsolete, takes on new relevance today in a world that often flees from suffering or considers it absurd. For it teaches us to find meaning in the cross when we live it united to Christ and his mother. It teaches us resilience. It teaches us faith. It teaches us love. Chapter 10. Consolation in Tribulations. Mary as intercessor and help of Christians. Throughout the centuries, Christians have turned to Mary as Mother of Mercy, especially in times of trial and tribulation. The Church invokes her as Consoler of the Afflicted and Help of Christians, recognizing her power of intercession before her Son. As Saint Alphonsus Liguori stated, "Many things are asked of God and are not obtained. They are asked of Mary and are obtained." This trust in the intercession of Our Lady of Sorrows is based on the conviction that she who has suffered so much can understand our sufferings and present them before the throne of divine mercy. Church history is full of testimonies about Mary's intervention in favor of her troubled children. In moments of danger for Christendom, such as the Battle of Lepanto in 1571, the faithful resorted to the Virgin's intercession and experienced her powerful protection. In times of epidemics wars, and natural calamities, Christian communities have found refuge under the mantle of the sorrowful mother as Saint John Paul II pointed out, the Church sees in Mary the one who remained faithful when the disciples fled, and therefore, in times of trial, she invokes her as a model of fidelity and a source of hope. Shrines dedicated to Our Lady of Sorrows are privileged places where many faithful experience Mary's maternal comfort. In these shrines, such as Kibeho in Rwanda, Our Lady of Sorrows in Chandavila, Spain, or the Dolorosa of Soriano, Mexico, pilgrims bring their sorrows and afflictions, their personal 7 sorrows, and return comforted and renewed. As numerous ex-votos and plaques of gratitude testify, Mary does not abandon those who invoke her with trust. The devotion to Our Lady of Sorrows is especially significant for those who are going through extreme suffering, terminal illnesses, loss of loved ones, profound crises. Blessed Cardinal Newman wrote, "When sorrow seems unbearable, looking at Mary at the foot of the cross gives us strength to continue. Her unwavering faith, her steadfast love, her enduring strength. These are gifts she offers to all who seek solace in her embrace. She understands, she grieves, and she offers hope." And Saint Thérèse of Lisieux, who endured great physical and spiritual suffering, found solace in uniting her pains with those of the Virgin. Beside the cross, Mary learned to suffer with love, and therefore she can teach us this difficult art. This consoling dimension of devotion to Our Lady of Sorrows is not an evasion of suffering, but a way to live it with Christian meaning. As Pope Francis teaches, Mary does not magically free us from pain, but she teaches us to transform it into a path of salvation, to live it as participation in the redemptive work of her Son. Therefore, turning to Our Lady of Sorrows in our tribulations means learning from her to say yes to God's will, even in the darkest moments. Chapter 11. Faithful Witness to the End. Mary's strength as a model for all believers. The image of Mary at the foot of the cross has become one of the most powerful symbols of Christian fidelity. While the disciples, except for John, had fled in fear, the mother remained steadfast beside her crucified Son. This attitude of Mary, described soberly by the evangelist with the words, "She stood by the cross," reveals an inner strength arising from unwavering faith. As St. Cyril of Alexandria points out, Mary's love was stronger than death and harder than hell. Mary's strength did not consist in the absence of pain, but in the ability to remain faithful amidst the most atrocious suffering. St. John Paul II commented, "The greatness of this woman lies in her fidelity, which implies faith, hope, and love, and in her inner strength in the face of the multiple swords that pierced her immaculate heart." This strength was not merely stoic or resigned, but active and participatory. Mary consciously cooperated in the redemptive work of her Son. Throughout history, countless Christians have found in Our Lady of Sorrows a model for facing life's trials. The martyrs, who gave their lives for the faith, contemplated the Virgin at the foot of the cross to remain steadfast until the end. The confessors, who suffered persecution and exile, were inspired by the strength of the sorrowful mother. The sick, who endure pain with patience, learn from Mary to unite their sufferings with those of Christ. As Saint Maximilian Kolbe said before his martyrdom in Auschwitz, "If the mother could remain firm beside the cross, I too, with her help, can be faithful to the end." Mary's strength is rooted in humility, that virtue that allowed her to recognize her smallness before God, and at the same time her greatness as a chosen creature. St. Bernard reflects, "Admire in Mary these two seemingly contradictory virtues, the deepest humility and the most unwavering strength." Mary's humility led her to accept God's will from the Annunciation to Calvary, pronouncing her fiat not only to the angel's message, but also to each of the swords that pierced her heart. For us, men and women of the 21st century, Mary's strength remains an inspiring model. In a world marked by the culture of the ephemeral and the tendency to avoid all suffering, Our Lady of Sorrows teaches us the value of fidelity, perseverance, and love that remains firm even in the most adverse circumstances. As Pope Francis affirms, Mary, a strong woman, shows us that true power is not in domination, but in the ability to stand tall with dignity when everything seems to be collapsing around us. Chapter 12. Our Lady of Sorrows in Popular Piety. Traditions, processions, and cultural manifestations in honor of the Sorrowful Mother. Devotion to Our Lady of Sorrows has given rise over the centuries to rich and varied expressions of popular piety that reflect the deep connection of the faithful with Mary's suffering. In Spain, a country with a deep-rooted Marian tradition, the Holy Week processions grant a privileged place to the image of the Sorrowful Mother, dressed in a black or purple robe, a gold-embroidered mantle, her heart pierced by 7 daggers, and tears of crystal running down her cheeks. Our Lady of Sorrows walks the streets accompanied by the reverent silence of the faithful and the solemn sound of drums and trumpets. Particularly moving are the processions of Sorrowful Friday and Good Friday in cities such as Seville, Malaga, Valladolid, or Granada. In Seville, the Madrugada constitutes one of the most intense moments of Holy Week, when the image of the Virgin of Macarena, with her face of contained sorrow, advances among the crowd at dawn. As theologian José María Castillo observes, in these manifestations of popular religiosity, beyond their artistic or folkloric value, a profound theology of the people is expressed, which sees in Our Lady of Sorrows the reflection of their own sufferings and hopes. In Latin America, devotion to Our Lady of Sorrows has been remarkably enculturated, merging with local traditions and acquiring its own characteristics. In Mexico, during Holy Week, many families erect altars dedicated to the Virgin of Solitude in their homes, adorned with purple flowers, candles, and elements that symbolize the Passion. In Guatemala, the carpets of flowers and colored sawdust that are made for the procession's passage are true works of ephemeral art that express popular devotion. In Peru, the procession of the Lord of Miracles is accompanied by the image of the Virgin of Solitude, in a tradition dating back to the 17th century. Sacred music has also enriched the devotion to the Sorrowful Virgin. The Stabat Mater, a sequence attributed to the Franciscan Jacopone da Todi, 13th century, has been set to music by great composers such as Pergolesi, Vivaldi, Rossini, and Dvořák, becoming one of the most sublime expressions of Mary's sorrow. In Spain, the saitas, flamenco songs performed during the processions, express with heartbreaking beauty the feelings of the people toward the Sorrowful Mother. As composer Arvo Pärt says, "Music can reach where words cannot, to express the inexpressible sorrow of Mary." The iconography of Our Lady of Sorrows has inspired numerous artists throughout history. From Michelangelo's Pietà, which shows Mary holding the lifeless body of Jesus with a serenity that transcends pain, to the moving Dolorosas of Pedro de Mena or Gregorio Fernández, with their realism that invites compassion. Pope Benedict XVI, a great lover of sacred art, commented, "These images do not simply seek to move our feelings, but to lead us to a deeper contemplation of the mystery of redemption and Mary's role in it." So popular piety, far from being a deviation or an impoverishment of faith, constitutes a genuine inculturation of the gospel. It allows the faithful to approach the mystery of the Passion through the maternal figure of Mary. Chapter 13. Marian Apparitions and the Sorrows of the Virgin. How Mary has emphasized her sorrows in various apparitions throughout history. Throughout the centuries, the Virgin Mary has wished to manifest herself to her children in various apparitions. And in many of them, she has referred to her sorrows, inviting the faithful to contemplate them and to unite themselves to them. One of the most significant apparitions in this sense is that of La Salette in the French Alps. On September 19, 1846, two shepherd children, Maximin Giraud and Melanie Calvat, saw a beautiful lady sitting on a rock, her head in her hands, weeping inconsolably. Dressed in a long white dress, a yellow apron, and a white shawl, she wore a cross with a radiant Christ on her chest, and on either side of the cross, a hammer and tongs, instruments of the Passion. The Virgin of La Salette, officially recognized by the Church in 1851, presented herself as a mother afflicted by the sins of her children, especially by blasphemy and the profanation of Sunday. As the theologian René Laurentin explains, in La Salette, Mary shows herself as the sorrowful mother who suffers from her children's distance from God and who weeps for the consequences this distance has for them. The Virgin asked for prayer, conversion and penance, inviting the faithful to share her sorrows for the salvation of souls. In the apparitions of Fatima, Portugal, in 1917, the Virgin Mary also referred to her sorrows. During the apparition of July 13th, the Virgin showed the three shepherd children a vision of hell and communicated to them, "You have seen hell, where the souls of poor sinners go. To save them, God wishes to establish in the world devotion to my Immaculate Heart. This heart, which iconography often depicts pierced by a sword, referring to Simeon's prophecy, is the same one that suffered the 7 sorrows." The Virgin of Fatima, as Sister Lucia, the visionary who survived until 2005, comments, "Came to remind us of the need to share the sorrows of her heart through prayer and sacrifice for the conversion of sinners." Particularly impactful are the apparitions of Kibeho in Rwanda, officially recognized by the Church in 2001. Between 1981 and 1989, several young people received visions of the Virgin, who presented herself as the Mother of the Word. On August 19, 1982, the visionary Marie-Claire Mukangango had a terrifying vision. She saw a river of blood, people killing each other, abandoned bodies with no one to bury them, a tree in flames, an open abyss, severed heads. Years later, this vision would be interpreted as a premonition of the genocide that ravaged Rwanda in 1994. In Kibeho, the Virgin specifically requested the revitalization of devotion to the 7 sorrows, teaching Marie-Claire the prayer of the 7 Sorrows Rosary and urging her to spread it. In more recent times, in the apparitions of Medjugorje, Bosnia-Herzegovina, still under study by the Church, the Virgin has made numerous references to her sorrowful heart. In one of her messages, transmitted through the visionaries, Mary expressed, "If you knew how much I love you, you would weep with joy." The theologian Antonio Maria Sicari comments, "These words reveal a double dimension of Mary's heart. On the one hand, her pain at the lack of response to her love. On the other, her joy when her children respond to that love." Thus, through various apparitions throughout history and in different parts of the world, Mary has wanted to remind her children of the importance of contemplating her sorrows, not for a morbid delight in suffering, but as a path of conversion and participation in the redemptive work of her Son. Chapter 14. A Prayer to Our Lady of Sorrows. A trusting plea to the sorrowful Mother. O Virgin Mary, sorrowful Mother who knew like no other the depth of suffering in seeing your beloved Son suffer and die, turn your compassionate gaze upon us, your children, who journey in this valley of tears. You, who stood firm at the foot of the cross when all seemed lost, teach us to keep hope alive even in the darkest nights of our lives. You, whose heart was pierced by 7 swords of sorrow, understand our anxieties and afflictions and present them before the throne of divine mercy. Mother of sorrows, who in Simeon's prophecy learned that your path would be marked by suffering, help us to accept with faith the trials that God allows in our lives, trusting that they too are part of His plan of love. You, who in the flight to Egypt experienced insecurity and exile, Protect all those who today are forced to leave their land, and those who live in situations of persecution and violence. Sorrowful Virgin, who knew the anguish of losing your son in the temple, accompany parents who suffer for their children, those who have lost them prematurely, and those who see them stray from God's paths. You, who met Jesus on the way to Calvary and contemplated his face disfigured by pain, teach us to recognize him in the faces of those who suffer, the marginalized, the forgotten of our society. Mother, who at the foot of the cross received your son's testament of love, making you mother of us all, gather us under your protective mantle, especially in the hour of our death. You who received in your arms the lifeless body of your son, console us in our sorrows and help us to live the separation from our loved ones with the hope of eternal life. Virgin of Sorrows, who in the solitude of Holy Saturday waited with unwavering faith for the resurrection, sustain our hope in moments of doubt and darkness. Through your tears, sorrowful Mother, through your pierced heart, through your faithfulness to the extreme, intercede for us before your Son, that we may know how to transform our sufferings into a path of redemption, and that one day, after having shared your sorrows, we may also share your glory in the kingdom of heaven. Receive, O Mary, this plea that we address to you with filial trust, you who never abandon those who invoke you with a sincere heart. Amen.